4. Let's talk about space, because this is where most people misunderstand avoidance. See, when someone pulls away, the natural reaction for many of us is to chase, 4. To close the gap, to demand reassurance. But with an avoidant, that very act of pursuit feels like pressure. It doesn't matter if your intention is love, 4. It lands in their nervous system as threat. And when a person feels threatened, what do? They retreat further. Not because they don't care, 4. Not because they don't value you, but because their deepest wiring tells them closeness equals loss of self. Now, this is where most relationships break down. 4. We confuse space with rejection. We think, if they really cared, they'd want to be with me all the time. But love doesn't mean erasing individuality. 4. It doesn't mean constant proximity. In fact, true loyalty is born when two people can stand apart and still feel the strength of their bond. For an avoidant, 4. Space is not the enemy of love. It is the condition in which love can survive. Think of it this way: imagine holding a bar of soap in your hand. 4. If you squeeze it too tightly, it slips away. But if you cup it gently, it stays right where it belongs. Avoidants are the same. The harder you grip, 4, the more they run. The more you allow space, the more they can relax into the relationship without feeling trapped. This is not weakness, or this is not avoidance of responsibility. It's a nervous system defense mechanism, a survival strategy that says, 4, I can only love you if I know I won't lose myself in the process. So what's the shift here? 4, it's learning to respect their rhythm without punishing them for it. When they need time alone, don't respond with guilt trips, silent treatment, or accusations. 4, respond with presence, with calm assurance. Let them know that space is not a threat to you, that you are secure enough in yourself not to demand constant validation. 4, that's when the magic happens. Because slowly they realize you are different. You're not another person trying to control them. 4, you're not another person making them feel wrong for their needs. You are a safe place where freedom and connection can coexist. And here's the paradox. When you stop chasing, they stop running. When you stop making their space mean abandonment, they stop using distance as a weapon. 4, they come closer not because you force them, but because they choose to. And chosen closeness is the most powerful form of loyalty you'll ever experience. 4, there's a deeper philosophy here too. Love is not about possession, it's about presence. You can sit in the same room with someone and feel galaxies apart. 4, or you can stand 1,000 miles away and still feel completely connected. Avoidants are teaching us this truth whether we realize it or not. 4, love breathes when there is room for both self and togetherness. Respecting space isn't losing intimacy. It's creating the conditions where intimacy can last. 4, so the next time an avoidant withdraws, instead of reacting with fear, choose understanding. Instead of closing the door with judgment, leave it open with trust. Instead of punishing them for needing oxygen, become the person who reminds them that love is not suffocation, it's expansion. Because when an avoidant feels that kind of acceptance, that kind of freedom, they don't just stay, they stay loyal. The more you respect their space, the more they'll give you their heart. Now let's move into something just as important: how you communicate with an avoidant. Because here's the truth. 4, words can either build a bridge or they can build a wall. And with avoidance, that wall goes up fast if they sense intensity that feels overwhelming. 4, you've probably seen it happen. The moment voices get raised, the moment emotions spill over too heavily, they shut down. Not because they don't care. 4, not because they're incapable of feeling, but because deep down they've trained themselves to associate emotional overload with danger. See, 4, most avoidants grew up in environments where emotions weren't safe. Maybe vulnerability was met with criticism, or neediness was shame, or opening up simply didn't get the nurturing response it needed, so they built a shield. That shield says, I'll protect myself by staying calm. 4, by staying distant, by staying in control. And when you come at them with high emotional intensity, even with love, their system reads it as chaos. And chaos is the one thing they cannot risk. So what does this mean for you? It means the way you express yourself matters more than you think. With an avoidant, 4, calm clarity is the secret sauce. When you bring them your needs without blame, without guilt, without emotional flooding. 4, you actually give them something they rarely feel: safety and connection. You're saying, I can express my truth without attacking you. 4, I can share my emotions without drowning you in them. That's powerful because it shifts the dynamic from survival to trust. 4, think of it like tuning an instrument. If you strum too hard, the strings snap. If you never touch the strings, the song is never played. But if you strike that balance, gentle, steady, intentional, you create harmony. Communication with an avoidant is about that balance. You don't mute your truth, but you don't deliver it in a way that triggers their defenses either. You hold your ground with strength while keeping your voice steady, your tone respectful, your energy calm. And here's what happens when you do: they start to listen. Not just to your words, but to your heart. They realize you're not their enemy. You're not trying to overwhelm them or control them. You're offering clarity without chaos. And that clarity feels like oxygen to someone who has spent their whole life bracing for emotional storms. Now, let's be real. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It doesn't mean walking on eggshells. It means mastering your delivery so that your message actually lands. Because if you communicate in a way that activates their defense system, your truth gets lost in the noise. But if you communicate with intention and calmness, your truth has a chance to reach them, to sink in, to change the relationship dynamic forever. And here's the irony: when they feel safe in your calm clarity, they eventually start to open up themselves, slowly, carefully, but consistently. The very thing they've avoided, deep emotional connection, begins to feel possible because you've shown them it can exist without chaos. You've modeled a new way of relating, and once they taste that, loyalty follows, because you've given them something they didn't even know they were craving. Love that doesn't overwhelm, love that doesn't suffocate, love that communicates without destroying safety. So when you speak to an avoidant, remember this: it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Deliver your truth with calmness, with clarity, with strength, and you'll notice the walls come down. They won't run from that, they'll lean into it, because when your words carry calm clarity, their defenses no longer feel necessary. And in that moment, loyalty is born. Let's go even deeper. We've talked about space. We've talked about communication. But here's another piece most people overlook when it comes to avoidance. It's the power of recognition. See, avoidants don't wear their hearts on their sleeves. They won't shower you with constant affection or grand emotional gestures. In fact, sometimes their love is so subtle, so quiet, you might miss it if you're looking only for the obvious. But just because it isn't loud doesn't mean it isn't real. Here's the truth: many avoidants walk around with a hidden fear of not being enough. That's the paradox. On the outside, they project strength, independence, control. But underneath, there's this question: am I worthy of love if I can't show up the way others do? Am I enough if I can't express it in the ways people expect? And when that question lingers unanswered, they often default to withdrawal. Because if they don't try, they can't fail. If they don't risk showing love, they won't risk rejection. That's where you come in. Because the one thing that breaks through that shield is acknowledgement. When you notice the little things, the way they fix something in the house without being asked, the way they provide, the way they protect, the way they quietly check if you made it home safe, you're speaking directly to that part of them that doubts their value. You're saying, I see you. I see what you're doing, and it matters. That kind of recognition is fuel to an avoidant. It reassures them that they don't have to be someone else to be loved. And here's what's fascinating: appreciation builds loyalty faster than demand ever could. If you push an avoidant to love you louder, to show up bigger, to express more, they'll feel like they're failing you. They'll feel like they're constantly coming up short, and that leads to more distance. But if you celebrate their strengths, even when those strengths are understated, something shifts inside them. They begin to relax. They begin to trust. They begin to believe, maybe for the first time, that they don't have to perform to be accepted. And when a person feels accepted as they are, that's when they anchor themselves to you for life. Think of it like watering a plant. Some plants thrive in full sunlight, others in the shade. If you try to force a shade-loving plant into the sun, you'll burn it. But if you nurture it in its natural environment, it grows strong and steady. Avoidants are the same. They don't always thrive on verbal affection or constant reassurance, but they blossom when you appreciate the unique ways they express care. Even if those ways look different from what you're used to. The beauty of this is that it doesn't just strengthen the relationship, it transforms it. Because once an avoidant feels seen and valued, they begin to take risks with their vulnerability. They'll start to show you more of their inner world. Not because you demanded it, but because you made it safe. And when someone who's spent their whole life protecting themselves finally decides to let you in, 4. That loyalty is unshakable. So remember, this love isn't about measuring how loudly someone shouts their feelings. 4. It's about recognizing the quiet language in which they already speak. For an avoidant, that language might be subtle, it might be understated, but it's real. 4. And when you learn to hear it, when you celebrate it, you create a bond that's deeper than surface level affection. Because when an avoidant feels truly seen, not for who you want them to be, but for who they already are, they stop running and they start staying. 4. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle: consistency. If you really want an avoidant to stay loyal, you can't win them over with control, pressure, 4, or manipulation. Those strategies backfire every single time. What draws them in isn't force, it's stability. 4. It's knowing that you're going to show up the same way tomorrow as you did today. It's the quiet confidence that your love isn't conditional, isn't erratic, 4, isn't something they have to second guess. Think about it: avoidants live with a deep fear of being trapped, of losing their sense of freedom in a relationship. 4. The moment they sense control, they instinctively start planning their escape. It's not even always conscious. It's wired into their nervous system. If love feels like a cage, their whole body tells them, get out now before it's too late. But when love feels like a safe harbor, when it feels steady, 4, predictable and trustworthy, they can finally stop scanning for exits. This is where consistency becomes your greatest tool. 4, and I don't mean perfection. I mean showing up in alignment with your words and actions. If you say you'll respect their boundaries, respect them. For if you say you'll be calm in communication, practice it. If you promise safety and freedom, embody it. Over time, that consistency rewires their nervous system. 4, slowly the old belief, if I get close, I'll be controlled or abandoned, starts to crumble, and a new belief takes its place. This is different. 4, this is safe. I can stay. The irony is that when you stop trying to control an avoidant, you actually gain their deepest commitment. 4, because freedom is not the opposite of loyalty, it's the soil in which loyalty grows. The less they feel like they're being managed, 4, the more they willingly invest. It's like watching a wild horse. You don't break its spirit by tying it down. You earn its trust by giving it room to breathe. 4, by proving you're not a threat, by showing up consistently until it chooses to walk beside you. And here's the deeper layer: consistency isn't just about them. 4, it's about you. It's about developing the emotional strength to not get pulled off center when they need space, when they communicate differently. 4, when they love in quieter ways. It's about being rooted enough in your own identity that you don't need constant reassurance to know your worth. 4, because when you embody that kind of inner stability, you become magnetic. You become the anchor they never knew they needed. Over time, 4, this dynamic transforms the relationship. Instead of a cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, it becomes a steady rhythm of closeness and space, trust and freedom. 4, independence and connection. And once an avoidant experiences that balance, they'll guard it fiercely. They'll stay, not because they're afraid to leave, 4, but because they know they've found something rare. Love that strengthens them without suffocating them. So if you want an avoidant to stay loyal for life, 4, don't try to control them. Don't try to force them into your mold. Be consistent. Be steady. Be the person who proves through action and presence, 4, that love can be both free and secure. Because when love feels like stability instead of control, an avoidant doesn't just stay, they stay devoted.